Welcome to FFBR Live, the podcast extension of Final Fight Bible Radio. It is Friday, March 20th, 2026. I am Matt Crane, station manager of this Christian radio ministry, and it's been a while since I did an episode focused on geopolitics and the things going on in the world, but today I'm going to spend some time examining this current war with Iran, address the conspiracy theories surrounding the motivations that led to this war, and hopefully give some balanced insight as well as some encouragement that things might not be quite as bad as they may seem. Glad you could be with us today, and just want to get started with a few things before we get into the lesson, or not lesson, but the episode today. I want to call it an episode, not a lesson. Anyway, want to let you know that there is a new audiobook now available on FFBR Premium. For those of you that are FFBR Premium subscribers, you know that we have several features that are available through FFBR Premium. We have several streams, a music-only stream, a preaching-only stream, teaching-only stream, scripture-only stream, and a youth kids stream, and soon we'll have an instrumental-only stream as well. But we also have audiobooks available, as well as the entire FFBR Live archive going back 3 years. And we're making some improvements to FFBR Premium as well, going to be adding a few more features. But in the meantime, we have a new audiobook available, and the audiobook is called They Found the Secret. And this particular book I haven't read, but it was found for me by a friend who understands identity-based Christianity versus performance-based Christianity. He brought this book to my attention, and so I've been listening to it as we go. But it's an incredible compilation of several different stories of missionaries and pastors over the years, for the past, going back into way early history of the church age to modern times, and basically discusses all the different ways that the Holy Spirit brought about the understanding of identity-based Christianity in the lives of various pastors and missionaries, both male and female. And so it's an extraordinary compilation, and for those of you that still have questions about identity-based Christianity and what we've been talking about on Final Fight Bible Radio in regard to that, that would be an excellent book to start listening to. If you don't have a copy, feel free to buy a copy. Some people like reading books as opposed to listening to them, but more people these days are liking audiobooks. So we make that available. One new chapter is released every Friday. So at this point, there's the introduction in chapter 1. But every Friday, there will be an additional chapter being posted until the entire book is there. And then, of course, there's several other audiobooks available. If you like the book, The Doctrine of the Doors, that I wrote, that's also available in our audiobooks, as well as Marx and Satan, written by Richard Warmbrand, as well as Hudson Taylor's Spiritual Secret, which also has to do with identity-based Christianity, and The War on the Saints by Jesse Penn Lewis. Excellent, fantastic book. I think that's all we have on there for now, but we'll be getting more on there in time to come. Also want to mention that the New Orleans Street Preaching Blitz is April 16th through the 18th, so that's coming up. And the New York City Street Preaching Tract Blast, New York City Street Preaching and Tract Blast is May 27th through 30th. So if you're in the vicinity of either one of those places, or you want to take a special trip, use some vacation hours to go to a street preaching meeting, the information and registration forms are available through the Final Fight Bible Radio website. And of course, it seems like those things have gone really well in the past. I've heard nothing but good from the people that have been a part of both of those. And I already know some people that are going to be a part of both the New Orleans one and the New York City one. I personally am not going to be at either one of those. Maybe next year, we'll see. But anyway, it'd be a great opportunity to do some evangelism. So also want to bring to everybody's attention something that I just found out this morning. It was actually very sad. And it's if you didn't know this already, be prepared to have your day ruined. But if you're watching on YouTube, you see there in the bottom corner there, Chuck Norris, action hero and star of Walker, Texas Ranger, dies at 86. my hero, Chuck Norris. Who even thought he could die? But Chuck Norris, he's passed away, and by all indications, that man was a Christian, so he's up with the Lord in heaven. But, I don't know if this is like the start of a new dispensation or something like that. I mean, I suppose we should have seen this coming. I mean, after all, the Bible did say, he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. So maybe the rapture can happen now. I'm just joking, of course. But no, it's horrible that Chuck Norris. I like Chuck Missler too, but Chuck Norris, yeah, he passed away. That's sad. So anyway, life will go on. God is still on the throne, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go ahead and go to a break, and when we come back, we'll get into the Bible study, or the history study. It's more of a history study than it is a Bible study today. But please feel free to post any questions or comments in the chat section, whether on the FFBR app or the YouTube live stream that's happening right now. If you have any comments or perspectives in regard to this Iran war, and what you think about Iran being attacked by Israel and the United States, what you think about Israel's relationship with the United States, I'd be interested to hear what the audience thinks along these lines. I'm going to give you some of my perspectives today, and we're going to look at a lot of different angles, but we'll do that right after the break. Stay tuned.
In this world we have our troubles, sometimes lonesome, sometimes blue, but the hope of life eternal.
The Bible says there is a way that seemeth right to a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death.
Get ready for a weekend of street preaching and open-air evangelism. Managed by Brant Zeller, hosted by Banners Unfurled and Morning Star Bible Baptist Church's Pastor Torrey Carter, it's the third annual New Orleans Street Blitz during the French Quarter Festival, Thursday, April 16th through Saturday, April 18th. Set the date on your 2026 calendar and get ready to join Brant Zeller and his team for 3 days of jam-packed evangelistic action. More information and the link to register is now available on the Final Fight Bible Radio website. The third annual New Orleans Street Blitz, April 16th through the 18th. The Bible says that faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. But how shall they hear without a preacher? Alright, so it's been a while since I talked much about geopolitics. Talked about a little bit in those episodes about Saturn and Jupiter and mythology repeating itself, but haven't really just spent a whole episode talking about things going on in the world, and we're living through such momentous times that I feel like I would be remiss not to talk about the crazy things going on in the world. And now, I get it, especially for those of you that, for those of you that were born in the 80s or born in the 90s like myself, I found this meme that's actually pretty funny. You can see it on the screen if you're watching YouTube. But 80s and 90s kids living through another historically significant event. It's a picture of Ben Affleck just like he's over it, and he's got a cigarette in his hand and he's just ready to die. But that's how it is for those of us who are millennials. It seems like every single year there's some other historically significant event happening, and it's been happening since 2001 with the Twin Towers being blown up. Nevertheless, I want to talk about the war going on with Iran right now. Obviously, it's a big deal. We're witnessing unprecedented historical events, things that have happened on a scale that have never been done before, and certain events that have never happened before. And so for that reason, I actually find these things extremely interesting. And I think it's worth talking about these subjects, especially in relation to what the Bible has to say, especially in the consideration of the fact that we're dealing with two extremely ancient people groups, two extremely ancient empires that go back thousands of years. The nation of Israel and also Iran, the Persian kingdom, the people of Persia. And so those two empires have had entanglements in their past histories already. You have the Assyrian Empire attacking northern Israel around 721 BC and basically destroying northern Israel. And then you had the area of Iraq with Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar taking the Jews captive there in around 606, 586 BC. And then you have the situation there with Persia and Esther in the book of Esther, and Cyrus giving freedom to the Jews to go back to their land, and that whole story there with Esther and Haman, the Amalekite, trying to eliminate the people of Israel. All of that stuff is going on over in that region of Susa, Shushan the palace, which is modern-day Iran. It's southern Iran, okay? So these things are very interesting, and this specific scenario that's unfolding right now within the last week is truly remarkable in its ramifications for events that are prophesied in the book of Daniel and in the book of Revelation. Now I'm going to get to that information, and I told you last week that I found something that is that blew my mind when I saw it, and it verified a couple other things in the scriptures for me that I've wondered about for a while, and I intend to get to those things that I discovered and reveal them to you here on FFBR Live. But before I do that, I need to get into some of this history, and we need to kind of get caught up with what's going on. So I might not get to that revelation today, but next Friday I most certainly will. I really do want to show you something that I found that is really remarkable, that backs up something that I wrote in the Time of the End 2. And so we'll get into that. But first, like I said, let's catch up on the things that are going on in the last 21 days. So, February 28th of this year was the launch of Operation Epic Fury. And this war now has been going on for 3 weeks as of today. And at the outset, President Trump said that he expected that this war would last about 4 to 5 weeks. Okay? So maybe it will, maybe it won't. And one of the things that I want to bring to this audience's attention, seeing that my audience mostly are Christians, specifically Bible-believing Christians, okay? I think most of my audience have not fallen for the narrative, the propaganda that modern-day Israel is not the real Jews. Okay, well, I've talked about that on this broadcast before. Modern-day Israel, I personally am fully convinced they absolutely are the people of God. They are not Ashkenazi, Turkish people that have no genetic connection to the people of the Jewish people of the Old Testament. I don't believe that. I also don't believe that the nation of Israel has ambitions to take over the world. You get that from some of this stuff about the Greater Israel Project, and there's been a few military leaders that might have been interested in the Greater Israel Project, but as a whole, the nation of Israel doesn't seem to be really interested in that. And where they get this Greater Israel Project stuff from, I cover this subject in the book Eden's Fate as well, but it's a misinterpretation of the Bible, a misunderstanding of the Bible in regard to the land that was promised to the Jews. By conflating the passages that pertain to the land that God would give to Abraham, and then God repeating that to Moses, every place where where your foot will tread will be your land. By conflating those two things together, what God said to Abraham and what God said to Moses, you have this situation where the promised land of Canaan is everything from the Nile River to the land of Hamath in the north, all the way down the Euphrates and Tigris down to the area of Babylon, or Ur of the Chaldees, where Abraham came from. God never told Abraham that he was going to give him all the land where his foot trod upon. God said he would give him the land of Canaan, the promised land. He would bring him to a land. God told Moses that he would give the Jews all the land that their feet trod upon. And he was referencing specifically the land of Canaan, okay? The idea that if all the land that Abraham's feet trod upon, if that was the land promised to Israel, then therefore Moses entered the promised land when he was on the west or east side of the Jordan River. Even though he never crossed over to the west side, right, because he died, technically Moses would have been in the promised land if you go with that theory, and that's not going to work. So this idea that Israel has this ambition to take over the greater Israel project and all this stuff, that's just, I think, a bunch of people looking at wrong Bible interpretation, assuming that the promised land is this greater Israel project and Israel has ambitions to take over that whole area. If they do have ambitions to take over that whole area, let's say they did, they would simply be misinterpreting what God said. The promised land of Israel extends from the river of Egypt, which is the Wadi El Arish, south of Judah, all the way up to the land of Hamath, or the border of the Euphrates River. So technically, the land of Israel actually extends from Palestine, if you will, is the land of Israel, land of Canaan, up through Lebanon and up into Syria. Actually, that's the land that they're going to get. So if anybody's going to be upset, it'd be the Lebanese and the Syrians. Okay. Nevertheless, this whole thing about Israel wanting to take over the world, that comes from the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, a document that came out around 1901 that by all indications is a complete forgery and was created by someone. People think it was probably the communist Russians, someone along those lines, but I have my suspicions. If I was going to place my bet, I would think it'd have something to do with those Jesuits, personally. Nevertheless, it was a document that was invented to place a whole bunch of blame on the Jewish people. And it was written in the sense of we're the Jewish people and the Goyim are a bunch of dirty animals and they deserve to be destroyed and we're going to take them over because we're the superior race. And you read the document and it actually is like the perfect playbook for an antichrist. Absolutely. But I don't believe the Jews wrote that document. I don't think that they're really that evil or that stupid. Although the Jews, I suppose it could be possible, but if they did, there's very little evidence to back that, and there's actually a lot of evidence to support the idea that they did not write the learned protocols, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. Now, I know a lot of you, you have social media, you have X, you have Facebook, and so sometimes that makes us think that we're experts on these subjects. But I would encourage you to download a PDF of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and actually read it. Okay, read it. I've read it. I read the whole thing. Okay, so I at least have a little bit more information than the average person does when it comes to that particular subject. Okay, so I encourage you to read it. After you read it, you might come to the same conclusion like, okay, yeah, I don't really think this is a Jewish document. All right, anyway, let's talk about this war with Iran. And it's been going on for 3 weeks. President Trump said it would last 4 to 5 weeks. So technically, everything is kind of still on track. What I want to emphasize today is for Christians to not get emotionally pushed in one direction or another when it comes to looking at these things. Because right now in the world, there is a lot of forces, there's a lot of propaganda on all sides trying to push you to one extreme or another. And if you're thinking emotionally, you're going to be more prone to getting pushed by the propaganda. You need to make sure to be thinking logically and to be thinking of all the different angles. Okay, and if you're not certain about something, stay open and stay neutral on your position, all right? That's wisdom, all right? So we have this situation where things are, for the most part, still on track. You say, well, was a crashed KC-135 refueling plane with 6 people who died. Was that according to the plan? Well, no, of course not. Of course, nobody wanted that to happen. No, but the thing is, all military campaigns expect to suffer some losses. All right? Now, for those of us that have not been in war, have not been in the military, we value every single life, of course, and even most people do. But the fact of the matter is, again, let's remove the emotion from it. And obviously, it's a very sad thing that some families lost their children. Obviously, that some Americans were killed. But we have to remove the emotion from it and think about this logically. Put yourself in the shoes of the U.S. military, or any military for that matter. War results in death. Death on both sides. Any time any military has ever entered into a war, there's always an expectation that there will be casualties. That's just an unfortunate truth of warfare. So, yes, a plane crashed, and yes, some American soldiers were killed, but technically that's still within the parameters of what was expected to happen. Okay? When it comes to the military, they have to think in terms of the greater good. Like, there's no military that ever expects to go into a battle without any casualties or losses whatsoever. It's just not realistic. Militaries have to think realistically, and they have to weigh the options, okay? The death of a few or do we accept the death of a few soldiers in order to prevent the death of perhaps hundreds of thousands of civilians? With a nuclear weapon or something along those lines, and we'll talk about that. So you got to think along these lines. You have to understand that if you were the military and there was an enemy that was threatening the death and destruction of your country, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, eventually you're going to have to go toe-to-toe with that enemy, and you're going to cause some death and destruction of your enemy. And unfortunately, in that process, there's going to be some death and destruction of your own forces. It's almost unavoidable, but you reckon that the cost, the sacrifice is worth the reward. All right, well, you say, well, things are going to plan. What about those school girls that were blown up, 150 children blown up by our U.S. military? And, of course, that is a tragedy. I'm not diminishing that at all. That is a tragedy, and our hearts go out for those children. I mean, for crying out loud. But again, let's try to not think emotionally, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try to think logically. And it doesn't mean that logic is bad, and it doesn't mean that emotion is bad. It's good to think both ways. It keeps you human to think emotionally, but you have to think logically as well. Do you honestly think that the United States or Israel deliberately aimed a ballistic missile at a girls' school in Iran? Because we just hate Iranian girls so much. I mean, honestly, do you really think that was intentional? Do you think our military is that reckless? I don't believe so. As a matter of fact, the Israeli military and the United States military has proven over and over and again that we try to be very precise in our strikes so as to not hurt civilians. But the problem is, what do you do when you have an enemy that sets up their military barracks and their munitions right next to daycares, right next to schools, and right next to hospitals? You know why they do that, don't you? It's because they use civilians as a human shield. People want to talk about the United States committing war crimes for blowing up a school of girls. Let's talk about war crimes for setting up a military compound right adjacent to a building full of little girls. Whose fault is it that those girls got killed? The U.S. military? Or the Iranians for putting their building right next to those girls? All right? I'm not happy that they got killed. Not at all. That is a tragedy. But let's also remember, ladies and gentlemen, that when it comes to war, civilians always get caught in crossfires, and civilians always get killed in wars. It doesn't make it any better. But unfortunately, war is a reality in this world. And the idea that we can exist in a world with no war is a pipe dream. Because there are people who, like the Bible says, I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Right? We want peace. But the only way you're going to have peace in this world is through strength and overpowering strength, because you have an enemy. There are evil people in this world that don't want peace. They want global domination. You want to talk about global domination? It's not the Jews that are trying to globally dominate this world. It's Iran. It's the Muslims. It's Islam, right? Islam is not the religion of peace. Islam means submission. Submission to Allah. Jihad means that you kill until the whole world is in submission to Allah. They will not stop. They are the ones trying to take over the world, okay? So, do you think that the militaries of the world, do you think they think logically, or do you think they think emotionally? If you ever want to understand the why behind what's going on in this world, you're going to have to think the way militaries think and the way governments think. A lot of what's on social media is a bunch of emotion. It's a bunch of civilians that have never had a rocket shot at them. It's a bunch of postings by civilians who have never had a knife put to their throat or a bullet shot at them. It's written by usually a bunch of civilians that know nothing about war, and so consequently, there's a lot of emotion on social media, so just be careful about that, all right? You're going to have to think like militaries think. Put yourself in the military's shoes. Put yourself in President Trump's shoes. Put yourself in Israel's shoes. Put yourself in Benjamin Netanyahu's shoes. Put yourself in Iran's shoes. In fact, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to put ourselves in their shoes. The title of today's episode is, What Would You Do? And I think when you start thinking along those lines, it brings a level of sanity back into the conversation. All right? So why is this war happening? Why is the U.S. even involved? Is any of this even really necessary? What are the theories? What are the reasons for attacking Iran right now? Why did that even happen? The most popular propaganda right now, I believe it's propaganda in the USA, going on right now, especially on social media, I believe the most popular propaganda is that the USA is being manipulated by Israel and that Trump is Netanyahu's lapdog. Now, if you believe that, that's totally fine. Listen, I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm really not. We're talking about opinions, okay? It's my opinion that that is incorrect, and I'm going to explain to you today why I think that's probably incorrect. Now, I could be wrong. There are some people who truly believe that the United States' White House has been captured by the Zionists, and essentially Donald Trump is being jerked around on a chain by Benjamin Netanyahu, the vicious, evil war criminal. Okay? The genocidal maniac. Maybe that's true. We'll talk about it. But let's think about several other angles and possibilities to why the things that are going on right now are going on. Maybe Trump is compromised, you know? Maybe Israel is blackmailing Trump, so Trump is taking orders from Israel. Maybe. But to be fair, I'm just going to throw this out here before we go to a break. You know, people say, well, Trump is in the Epstein files and it's been confirmed that he's a pedophile. Has it? I mean, the thing is they keep saying these things, but then they never produce evidence for it. And whenever they produce their evidence, it's always been proved that these things have already been addressed years ago. And the people that make these accusations have already been dealt with and investigated by the FBI and confirmed lunatics, you know, people just making stuff up, right? So you have to be careful. Again, where's the evidence? If there's evidence, then okay. But you start digging into some of these posts on social media and you start to find out, oh, wait a second, the FBI already knew about this like 4 years ago, and it was proven to be a complete hoax. Okay. Because here's the thing, Trump's personality, is he being manipulated by Benjamin Netanyahu? He himself says no. Benjamin Netanyahu says no. Maybe they're lying. But the thing is, Trump's personality, everybody knows that he thinks of himself as the boss. He's the boss. So I kind of don't think that he's being manipulated, okay? Maybe he is, but we'll get into it. And then also, if there was any damning blackmail info on President Trump, don't you think the CIA and the FBI would have used it against him already? I mean, if it was there, don't you think we would have already heard it? Why would they be wasting their time with tax returns and not filing taxes properly on some of his buildings in New York back in the 80s and 90s? Like, why go through all that trouble to try to put him in jail over that when the whole time you're sitting on photographic evidence and emails of him doing horrible things to children? You see, it just doesn't really add up logically, and so I strongly doubt that that's what's going on. Nevertheless, I'm not white-pilled on Trump. I'm not even white-pilled on Israel, for that matter. I am pro-Israel and I am pro-Trump. I think, we'll get into it when we get back. Let's go to a break. Stay tuned.
Life lets you down and you feel more broken than whole. When the wounds go deeper than words and you can't tell a soul.
The Bible says, "And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book." You're listening to Final Fight Bible Radio.
All right, so what I'm giving you today is the perspective of a King James Bible-believing Christian, all right? Now, it doesn't mean that all King James Bible-believing Christians agree with me, but I am a King James Bible-believing Christian, and so I want to give you my perspective on the things that are going on in this world in regards to Israel, Iran, and the United States of America, because there are a lot of Christians online, or at least professing Christians, people who claim to be Christians who are saying a lot of things. And it's amazing to consider that we're living in a time where the whole world is becoming very divided when it comes to, because of Israel. Israel, the subject of this little tiny nation in the Middle East, is like causing this massive division of all peoples of the world. They are truly, like it says in Zechariah 12, verse 3, the Lord says in that day, now technically this verse is talking about the Great Tribulation, but he says, "In that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it." It's amazing that Jerusalem is still this focal point in the world, this burdensome stone that is causing all kinds of problems for the world and even problems for the MAGA movement here in the United States of America. All right. Now, when it comes to all these things going on, you want to be careful that this is just wisdom for things in general. If you hear just one side of the story, don't jump to conclusions. All right. You need to consider that there might be other sides to the story, especially when it comes to war. You have to be careful that to think that sitting on the sidelines, you have it all figured out because and the war is based on one single thing. War is very rarely ever based on one single thing, and usually there's multiple reasons for it. And you also have to keep in mind the fact that there is a lot of disinformation deliberately fed to the masses for propaganda reasons to support one side or the other, and there's also disinformation from the other side trying to undermine the other side. That goes on both ways. So there's going to be a lot of fog. There's going to be a lot of information being thrown out. And when you add the whole advent of AI, it becomes extremely difficult to even tell if what you're watching is real or not. Okay? So, and especially when you're dealing with the news media, they are notorious for lying about wartime scenarios. You know, they'll show a kid, you know, bleeding from his head, lying in his father's lap and say that this was, you know, Israel did this to these Palestinians, when in reality the picture was taken like 10 years ago in Syria when ISIS attacked the Syrian Muslims or something like that, when the Shiites attacked the Sunnis or some stupid thing like that. So it's like, you got to be careful. All right, now, the primary stated reason for this war, the primary reason that everybody gives is that Iran was building a nuclear weapon and had to be stopped. And I understand why people scoff at this. I do. I understand that. The internet ridicules Benjamin Netanyahu as being a total liar because Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying that Iran is 6 months away from a nuke as long as he's been prime minister of Israel. He's been saying this for decades. So the question is Benjamin Netanyahu lying? All right. Well, maybe he is. Maybe he is, but also let's consider the possibility, at least, devil's advocate, let's consider the possibility that Benjamin Netanyahu is not lying about that. After all, our own intelligence in the United States of America also claimed that Iran was building a nuclear weapon. That's why we did Operation Midnight Hammer. Okay, so maybe our own intelligence is lying too. I don't know. But I mean, let's think about these things. What if they're not lying? What if Iran... Well, let me ask you this. Does Iran want nuclear weapons? Absolutely. They do. They do want nuclear weapons. Has Iran been trying to build a nuclear weapon? The answer is an emphatic yes. Now, for the people out there that think that, well, no, they don't want nuclear weapons, they just want nuclear energy for their country. The problem is, every single it's obvious that you only need a certain amount of plutonium or chemicals or whatever to have nuclear energy in a country. They've been way exceeding that. And the only reason why you try to exceed that kind of nuclear energy is if you're trying to build a nuclear weapon. As a matter of fact, well, let's see. Let's go ahead and play this. I've got this deputy speaker of the Iranian Parliament states on the record, we tried to develop nuclear weapons, but we couldn't keep it a secret. Let me show you this. Here we go. Let's see if I can do this. All right. Now this guy's speaking in
فعالیت هستش این واقعا هدفمون ساخت بمب بوده ما یعنی شما میگید هدف ساخت بمب.
Okay, so since you can't speak Persian, I'll read it for you. All right, so he's in this interview, he says, when we first entered nuclear activities, our real goal was to build a bomb. No point denying it. So this is an official of Iran saying that we wanted to build a bomb. Absolutely. He said our real goal was to build a bomb. And the interviewer says, you mean the goal was really to make a bomb? And this guy says, yes. He says, whose goal? It was the goal of the whole system. Everyone who started the nuclear program, the real goal was to build a bomb. We had started and we wanted to go all the way. If we could keep it a secret and test the bomb, he says, okay, it would be over, just like Pakistan. Once we began, we had to finish it. And so he says, what you're saying, we've never heard such things officially before. What you're saying, won't that affect the negotiations? And he says, well, nobody pays attention to what I say. He's just a scientist. Foreigners will eventually find out the truth. So let's see. I'm going to come back here. So I'll put these links in the show notes. And I probably have an echo as well there. Fix the echo. I'll put the links in the show notes to that video, but that's an Iranian deputy speaker of the Iranian Parliament saying, yeah, we were trying to build a nuclear bomb. Like, that's a fact. Okay? So you can disagree with him if you want, but the truth is, the obvious truth is that the Iranians want a nuke. So the question is, why don't the Iranians have a nuke? after all these years? After 40 years, why is it that the Iranians don't have a nuclear weapon yet? What is going on here? Hold on. Stand by. There we go. Why don't they have a nuclear weapon yet? Well, let me ask you this. Why do you think they don't have a nuclear weapon yet? Could it be possible that because for 40 years, this whole time, Israel has been sabotaging Iran's attempts at getting a nuclear weapon? I mean, that's a possibility at least. They've been blowing up for decades the construction sites and the factories for the nuclear weapons. They've been assassinating physicists and scientists like every single year for the last 40 years associated with the Iranian nuclear program. If you remember, they used a massive cyber attack to shut down the nuclear sites about 5 or 6 years ago. It was in the news. It was like the first time ever a massive cyber attack had been used in warfare to that scale. And so Israel has been very effective. But has Iran stopped trying? The answer is no. And so consequently, it's not outrageous for Netanyahu to continually and perpetually be warning about Iran having a nuclear weapon. It's been this back and forth this whole time. Iran's been trying and Israel's been stopping. And given enough time, it is inevitable that Iran will get a nuke, and when they do, what do you think they're going to do with it? All right, listen to this if you're not sure of what Iran would do with a nuclear weapon if they ever got one.
Why are so many people with so many different perspectives, from the Prime Minister of Israel to the King of Saudi Arabia, so worried that Iran might build a deliverable nuclear weapon? Or, to put it even more simply, why do we have to stop Iran from getting the bomb? The reason is painfully obvious. They might actually use it. France has nuclear weapons. So does the United Kingdom. But nobody worries that they will use them. It's not nuclear weapons that are the problem. It's who has them and what they might do with them. We do not worship Iran, we worship Allah, said Iranian leader Ayatollah Khomeini in 1980. I say, let this land burn. I say, let this land go up in smoke, provided Islam remains triumphant in the rest of the world. A militant nation that does not fear its own destruction is a sure threat to its enemies. And that threat is taken to a whole new level if the militant nation arms itself with nuclear weapons. Who are the enemies of the Islamic Republic of Iran? There are three. The first enemy of Iran is the United States of America. A common slogan chanted by Iranians at public rallies is "Death to America." But it's not just a slogan. Iran has been committing actual acts of war against what it calls the Great Satan for over 3 decades. There was Iran's seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in 1979, the 1983 bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut that killed 241 American servicemen, and the 1996 Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia that killed another 19 Americans. Not to mention the war in Iraq, during which Iran did little to disguise the fact that it supplied anti-American militias with sophisticated, armor-piercing munitions responsible for the maiming and death of hundreds of U.S. soldiers. A nuclear Iran could greatly expand its efforts to harm American interests, secure in the knowledge that its possession of nuclear weapons would make any military retaliation extremely unlikely. And over time, and not much time, a nuclear Iran could develop the sort of intercontinental ballistic missiles that would bring American and European cities within range of its weapons. A second enemy of Iran, which is a Shiite Muslim nation, are the Sunni Muslim nations of the Middle East. An Iranian bomb would instantly spark a nuclear arms race in the region, as Arab states, nearly all of which have majority Sunni populations, move to defend themselves against aggression from Iran. As these regimes and dictatorships race to become nuclear powers, the chances that nuclear weapons might be used, either directly or through terrorist proxies, grow exponentially. And the third and ultimate enemy of Iran is Israel. Only around 1,000 miles separate the Islamic Republic from the Jewish state. Iranian leaders have called Israel a rabid dog, a cancerous tumor that needs to be cut away, and have called publicly and repeatedly for Israel's annihilation. They wage a continuous terrorist war against Israel through their proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas. Former Iranian President Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, a man often described as a moderate and a pragmatist in the Western press, articulated the Iranian position this way. If one day the Islamic world is also equipped with weapons like those that Israel possesses now, then the imperialist strategy will reach a standstill because the use of even one nuclear bomb inside Israel will destroy everything. However, one bomb will only harm the Islamic world. He's right. That's why the civilized and sensible leaders of the world cannot allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons. Because once the Iranians do, they will pose a severe threat to the security of America and Europe, spark a regional arms race that could see the world's worst players acquire the world's worst weapons, and threaten the Jews with extermination for the second time in a century. Or, to put it more simply, Iran cannot be allowed to get the bomb because they might actually use it. I'm Brett Stevens.
All right, so I'm going to talk more about this nuclear threat of Iran next week and talk about some things that the Bible says that I believe the Bible predicts that Iran is going to use a nuclear weapon against Israel. And I'll explain to you why I think that. And if you've read my book, The Time of the End 2, you're familiar with some of what I'm going to say next week, but I do have some additional information that I think is going to be very, very interesting. But if you were in Netanyahu's shoes, what would you do? I mean, Iran is the financial founder of all the terrorism that occurs in your country. Iran is your most powerful foe, and Iran does pose an existential threat to your little country. So what would you do? Would you wait around, if you were Benjamin Netanyahu, would you wait around for your enemy to build its full strength and arsenal? Would you let them strike first? Israel has been plagued in the past by feckless, spineless leadership, just like the USA has. And so the question is, should Netanyahu leave the nation of Iran for the next administration to deal with? Do you think Benjamin Netanyahu loves the Jewish people? I think he does. Netanyahu, you have to remember, he's a soldier. He was a part of the IDF Special Forces. His own brother was killed in a military operation in Egypt, going against Nasser. Nasser, is that his name? I forget his name. Anyway, Netanyahu is a soldier. But what if the next prime minister of Israel was just some lame politician? How do you think Israel would fare against a full-powered Iran with a spineless prime minister and possibly a spineless president of the United States, or even a president of the United States who is against the nation of Israel? You see that? Can Netanyahu take that kind of a risk? Would you? If you loved your country and you loved your people, would you take that kind of a risk and just push off the Iranian problem? Or would you take advantage of the unique situation and the unique opportunity that you have at this time in history? Iran doesn't have the bomb yet. Iran's ally of Russia is completely preoccupied with Ukraine. You have a strong friend in the United States White House who is actually willing to do something about a problem, not just talk. And your nation is behind you. The people of Israel are behind Benjamin Netanyahu for the most part because of the anger from the October 7th attack. Now, I understand there's a big theory and idea that the October 7th attack was a false flag allowed by the Israeli government. Maybe that's true. I'm not really sure. But either way, it wasn't IDF forces that came in and slaughtered all those civilian Jews. It was Hamas terrorists funded by Iran. Now, to what extent the Mossad had a role in that or knew it was going to happen. That's another conversation. Nevertheless, it was the enemies of Israel that killed all those people. And the people of Jerusalem, the people of Israel, Tel Aviv, they hate their enemies. Understandably so. If you lived in a little country the size of New Jersey, and you constantly had rockets falling into your cities, and you constantly had to go seek bomb shelters every so many days when the sirens sounded, if you had friends and family that had been killed by terrorist attack, you would probably be all for the war against Iran too. I mean, we're upset with illegal aliens stealing our elections, taking our jobs, causing our housing prices and every other price to go up, taking our Medicaid, taking all of our welfare. We're upset about them, and we generally, for the most part, Americans who love this country are pro-ICE. They might not like all their methods or all their ways of doing things, but for the most part, we want those illegals out of our country. Why? Because they're vexing our nation. Well, what if those illegal aliens were also going around blowing themselves up and killing civilians and shooting rockets and blowing up schools and everything? We would be even more so wanting them out of our country, right? We would be at war with Mexico, right? So put yourself in the Jews' shoes, all right? Honestly, if I was the leader of Israel, I would hit Iran right now too. And you know what I would also try to do? I would try to use all of my influence to try to get the United States of America to help me. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? This war might actually also be in the best interests of the United States of America too, not just Israel's best interests. Think about this. Iran supposedly attempted to assassinate President Trump. At least that's what the United States intelligence says. I don't know if that's true or not. But supposedly they did. They tried. Well, if that's true, then that would deserve United States retaliation. Iran is also strategic for China's oil and trade. China had a lot to do with the coronavirus, remember that? China had a lot to do with the stolen elections in this country. China had a lot to do with fentanyl in the U.S. China is the United States of America's number one threat, more so than Russia, for sure. Russia's not a threat to us. So Trump cutting off China's economic life support by first taking Venezuela and now Iran, and if the U.S. hasn't already taken the Panama Canal, that's probably next, okay? So Iran doesn't really pose a threat to the United States of America, granted, but China does. And Iran is strategic for China's Belt and Road Initiative. All right, so this war with Iran and the USA being involved, it might not be so much Benjamin Netanyahu manipulating Trump into a war as much as it is President Trump seeing this as a perfect golden opportunity to cut off another one of the heads of the Chinese Hydra. All right? So here's something else to consider. And I'm going to go a little bit long today. That's okay. Here's something else to consider. Have you seen all the videos of Iran before the imam took over? I mean, you saw a video, if you see it online, you see all this prosperity in Iran, you see freedom, you see women not having to wear hijabs and all that. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 that ousted the Shah of Iran and resulted in the supreme Ayatollah, the supreme leader, taking over Iran, and the oppression of 90 million Iranians, all of that in 1979 was because of the USA CIA. That is a fact that's on record. It's not even disputed these days. Our United States government was involved in the overthrow of the Shah in Persia and resulted in the Ayatollah taking over. The US CIA is responsible for everything that has happened in Iran since 1979. And given that fact, it makes one wonder if in some way the United States of America might have a moral obligation to make that right. The United States of America is responsible for 90 million Iranians being oppressed by their government for the last 47 years? I wonder if we have a moral obligation to fix that. I wonder if Proverbs chapter 3, verse 27 applies in this situation. Have you ever read Proverbs 3:27? Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Here's a question for you. I wonder what God thought about the U.S. CIA installing the Ayatollah. I wonder if God might be inclined to bless the USA if we righted that wrong. I mean, that kind of gives you a little bit different perspective on this whole Iranian war, does it not? I mean, I want those people to be free. Do you care? I mean, let's talk emotions. Do you care about the oppressed 90 million people of Iran who are oppressed by their government? It's a totalitarian regime. They stone women. They dig a hole and put a woman in it, put a blanket over her head, and then stone her for showing her hair. It's a backwards society. It's a primitive, satanic government. All right? By the way, if you were in the Iranian people's shoes, would you be for or against what's happening? I think that question is pretty obvious. If you've watched any of the videos coming out of Iran, every time we drop a bomb on one of the leaders or assassinate one of the leaders or cause them to be killed, the people are cheering. You can hear it from the top of hotel rooms. They have people filming from the top of hotels, and you can hear the crowds cheering because the United States is getting involved, okay? The Iranian people want it. All right, now that doesn't mean that we need to be a part of it necessarily. There's all these arguments, there's all these angles, but it's not necessarily the worst thing that could have ever happened. And it's not necessarily a forever war either. We're only 3 weeks into it. Again, think logically, not emotionally. We're 21 days into it. If this thing is over in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or even 4 weeks, it will be the most impressive military campaign that has ever been waged. A war that lasted 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks to overthrow a superpower like Iran, that's unheard of. All right, but everybody's already freaking out that this is going to be a forever war. We're going to be there for the next 20 years and a bunch of American soldiers are going to get killed. That could happen, especially if we had a leader like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or President Bush or some rhino. But that is not who's leading the White House, all right? I don't believe that Trump or Pete Hegseth, the leader of our armed forces, I don't believe either one of them want a prolonged, protracted war. They want this thing over as soon as possible, and I think they're going to do it, all right? Finally, keep in mind that Trump promised that Iran would never have a nuclear weapon. Promises made, promises kept. Let me ask you this. If Trump promised that, how do you think he's going to fulfill that promise if Iran continually keeps on trying to build a nuclear weapon? If Iran refused to stop, then the only way that President Trump could keep that promise would be by stopping Iran. How do you stop Iran? Well, the only way to stop people who refuse to stop is to make them stop. Trump asked them to stop. President Trump pressured them to stop. President Trump threatened them to stop, and they didn't stop. So what would you do if you were President Trump? Now, I understand that this CIA guy, Joe Kent, is going around telling Tucker Carlson that, Iran was nowhere close to getting a nuclear weapon, and that's not true. But you have to remember, you better do a little bit of research on Joe Kent. He's been saying two completely opposite things. His wife was killed in fighting against ISIS in Syria, and at the time he was pro-Israel, but now all of a sudden he's anti-Israel. When he was first seeking public office, he was pro-Israel and against Iran having a nuclear weapon, and now all of a sudden he says, Iran was not a threat to the United States of America, an imminent threat. They didn't have a nuclear weapon. They weren't even close. In my opinion, I think that guy is lying. I think he's lying. Now, maybe he's not, but you have to remember he could be lying. Okay, take that into account. Look at both sides. All right, I think Iran was trying to build a nuclear weapon. How close they were, I don't know, but it was a perfect opportunity to finally put an end to this global sponsor of terror. All right? So, if I was President Trump, I know what I would do. If Iran wasn't stopping, I would force them to stop. And I would do it as swift as possible, and I would do it as hard as possible. and I would do everything I could to prevent American boots on the ground and causing another forever war. But I would also be realistic, ladies and gentlemen. I would be realistic and recognize that some boots on the ground probably are necessary because it's impossible to end and win any war without some boots on the ground. But if I was going to do that, I would make it worth my while. I would make sure that my country's expenses were reimbursed in this war. And that's obvious to any good businessman. Because you have to remember, President Trump is a businessman first and foremost. He doesn't do anything for any other nation unless it benefits the USA, as he should. That's his job as president. But I agree that attacking Iran wasn't really America's top priority. It was a top priority for Israel, but not for the USA. So I want to end with this idea, this question. The question is, why did Trump, or what deal did Trump make with Benjamin Netanyahu? I have no doubt that Donald Trump made a deal with Benjamin Netanyahu. I do not believe that our president is a lapdog. I don't believe that our president is Netanyahu's poodle. I think Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump have some similar interests, and they made a deal. Now, what would that deal be? Let's think about that. I mean, we bombed Iran's nuclear sites with Operation Midnight Hammer on June 22nd, 2025, but it doesn't seem like the USA really got much from Israel from that attack. Like, what did we get for that? Nothing. Not yet, anyway. But now we're back, and we're finishing the job in Iran. So the question is, will we get anything from Israel for this? Now, some people say, probably not, but maybe we will. Let me ask you this. What does Israel have? What could Israel offer that would be of benefit to the United States of America and could benefit President Trump or be of interest to him? What does Israel have to offer? Well, they have intelligence to offer. You say, well, we already have intelligence. We have the CIA, we have the NSA, and we have the FBI. What do we need Israel's intelligence for? Well, that's true. We do have good intelligence, but let me ask you this. If you were in Trump's shoes, would you fully trust your CIA, NSA, and FBI? I mean, you know your NSA spied on you. You know the FBI tried to put you in prison. And you know your CIA attempted to have you assassinated already. There's a civil war going on within the institutions of the United States government. And even though there are some good people that are at the top now, there are still a lot of very bad people within those massive institutions. Those institutions have tens of thousands of people working in them. If your own intelligence agencies worked against you in your first presidential administration, where could you turn to for reliable, proper intelligence? Who indeed? Well, you'd want to turn to somebody who loved you, who had great intelligence and was also a lover of you. You'd want to turn to somebody who wanted to see you succeed. You know, if I was in Trump's shoes, I might rely heavily on the Israeli Mossad for my intel to help me root out the evil people within my own country's government. I might rely on the Israeli Mossad to help me root out the evil people within my own intelligence agencies within my country's government. What would you do? What if the deal was, once Israel's existential threat is eliminated, Israel will help the USA eliminate its existential threat? What is Israel? What is the USA's existential threat? It's the deep state. I don't know if I'm right about that, but I hope I am. And I know that it's at least plausible. And if I am right, let me ask you this. If I am right, and Israel does, after this war with Iran, Israel comes around and helps us drain the swamp, I wonder what all these anti-Zionists will say then. You know, what if Israel was responsible for the deep state being overthrown in the United States of America? Which, by the way, would bring about great global prosperity with Iran out of the way and the deep state out of the way. And Donald Trump kicks the UN out because he's already got his new board of peace. Right? What if Israel was responsible for the United States deep state being overthrown? Do you think they'll get any thanks from these anti-Zionists? Of course not. I'm still counting on great prosperity to come based on my understanding of how the church age ends and how the beginning of sorrows begins. But if there's going to be great prosperity, something's got to give. And I would think that it would have to happen soon, because President Trump only has a few more years in office. So we'll see. But regardless, what I want to end with this is don't be discouraged. Christian, don't be doom and gloom. Don't be black-pilled. I do believe there is still hope. Things aren't over yet. I still believe that God put Trump in the leadership position for a reason, and I believe that God spared him, his life, from the assassin's bullet for a reason. Remember the assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania, the attempt, how close that was. I believe with all my heart that was a miracle from God. So put yourself in God's shoes, so to speak, and ask yourself, why would God do that for President Trump? If this whole thing is just going to be another waste of 4 years, what was the point in sparing his life? Let's just give the government to Kamala Harris and get it over with. Why did God do that? Why did God spare President Trump's life? And why did he put him in office a second time when it was completely impossible for that to happen? Unless, of course, you think that, Trump is a satanic asset of the Illuminati and they control the election and he's taking orders from Satan and all this, whatever. I think God had something to do with it. Knowing the Lord, so the question was, why did God do that? Well, knowing the Lord, the answer probably has something to do with Israel, God's people. All right, so next week I'm going to get into some very interesting developments that pertain to Iran and what the Bible prophesies is going to happen in the near future. I'm going to talk about what the Bible prophesies is going to happen between Iran and Israel in the end times. Today was mostly geopolitical, but next week I'll dig deep into what the Bible has to say about these things. God bless you. Have a good week.
When I see Old Glory waving in a schoolyard, where children laugh and play and learn what's right, I remember those who fought to forge our freedom, and those who'd rather die than lose the fight. But today it seems we take it all for granted, and it's easier